I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, in what looked like your average suburban home with a white picket fence and a maple tree that turned brilliant red every fall. But behind those doors, the family dynamics were never normal. My name is Sarah Winslow, and until last year I thought my parents, Cynthia and Roger Winslow, were strict but loving. I thought family always came first. Turns out I was dead wrong. It all began when my younger brother, Eldon, turned 16. He was obsessed with live streaming. He wasn't some casual gamer. He believed he was destined to be the next Twitch megastar. And my parents, they indulged him in everything: high-end gaming PCs, endless fast food, even skipping chores. I was 19 in my sophomore year at Indiana University, living at home to save money. My room was my sanctuary. Walls covered with my sketches, stacks of books, and a window that overlooked the backyard swing set I'd had since I was a kid. Then, one night in October, my parents dropped a bomb. I stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, the smell of damp concrete clawing at my nose, clutching nothing more than a faded blanket and a box of clothes I had managed to carry down myself. Above me, I could hear footsteps, laughter, and the sound of furniture being dragged across the hardwood floor. The sound of my life being stripped away piece by piece. From the crack of the basement door, I caught glimpses of movers hoisting my dresser, my bookshelves, even the easel where I had spent countless nights sketching until sunrise. Every piece of me, my comfort, my memories, my sanctuary, was being carried upstairs not for me, but for my brother Eldon. He was grinning ear to ear, headset looped around his neck, shouting instructions like he was the director of some movie. Yeah, put the desk against that wall. Make sure the camera gets good lighting from the window. Oh, don't forget the soundproof panels. My subs are gonna love this setup. My parents, Cynthia and Roger, stood proudly by his side. My mom clapped her hands together like it was Christmas morning, her eyes shining with pride. This is going to make such a difference for your career, Eldon. Just imagine the sponsorships, the donations, the followers. I tightened my grip on the blanket. 19 years in that house, 19 years of memories in that room. And now, with the same cold efficiency you'd use to swat away dust, they were erasing me. Wait! My voice cracked, raw from the dust in the basement, but more from the sting of betrayal. What about me? My dad didn't even blink. He turned, looked me dead in the eye, and said flatly, "This isn't about you anymore." The words landed like a punch in the gut. I wanted to scream, to demand that they stop, to tell them how cruel this was, but the words stuck in my throat. Because deep down, a sickening realization crawled into my chest. They didn't care. Not about my feelings, not about my art, not about the fact that I was their daughter. The only thing that mattered was Eldon's live stream. He smirked as he slid into my old desk chair, already testing the swivel as though it had been his all along. "Thanks for warming up the room for me, sis. Don't worry, you'll be fine in the basement. Mold builds character." The movers chuckled. Even strangers laughed at my expense. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself, feeling the damp chill seeping up from the concrete floor. The basement was unfinished, just exposed beams, cracked walls, and the constant drip-drip of a leaky pipe. There was no carpet, no light except the flickering bulb above me, and no window to escape the suffocating air. It wasn't a room. It was a dungeon. And yet, to my parents, this was acceptable. "Stop sulking," my mom snapped when she noticed my face. "You're older. You can handle discomfort. Your brother needs the right environment to thrive. Think of it as a sacrifice for the family." Sacrifice. That was the word she used. As if stripping me of my room, my dignity, my place in the house, was some noble act I should be proud of. I wanted to shout back. And what about the sacrifices I've made? The nights I babysat Eldon so you could go out? The times I gave up new clothes so you could buy him video games? The times I defended him at school, even when he was in the wrong? But all I did was bite my tongue until I tasted blood. Because at that moment I realized the truth. They had never seen me as their daughter. I was just spare, convenient, disposable. As the last of my things disappeared upstairs, I sat on the cold couch shoved into the basement corner. Springs poked through the thin cushion, creaking under my weight. My childhood bed, the one I had fallen asleep in while reading books under the covers with a flashlight, was upstairs now, rebranded as Eldon's streaming backdrop. And with every sound check, every laugh, every cheer from my parents above, I sank deeper into the basement's shadows. I whispered to myself, almost a prayer, "Please, let this be temporary. Let this be just for a few weeks. Let them remember I'm their daughter too." But the truth clawed at me. I knew it wasn't temporary. Because when my dad's voice boomed through the ceiling, "Eldon, this is your space now. Make it your own," I understood something with chilling clarity. I had been erased. The cruelest part? Nobody noticed the tears streaming down my face. Nobody cared that my voice shook when I tried to plead. I was invisible in my own home. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been pushed aside for someone deemed more important, you know that silence that fills your chest, it's not just hurt. It's rage waiting to wake up. And as I sat there in the basement, the muffled sound of Eldon's fake laughter echoing through the vents, I thought the worst was behind me. That losing my room, my identity, was a nightmare. But I was wrong. Because what they had done wasn't the end of the nightmare. It was only the beginning. In our house that looked picture-perfect from the outside, white shutters, a yard that smelled of cut grass, a front porch swing where my mother liked to sip coffee. If you passed by, you'd think we were the kind of family that sat around campfires singing songs together. But inside it was different. I was the quiet one, the girl who kept her grades clean, who sketched in the margins of her notebooks when nobody was watching. I didn't complain when chores piled on me or when curfews tightened around my neck. I told myself I was the responsible one. That was my place. Eldon, on the other hand, never had to earn anything. His report cards bled red ink, but he'd come home with a brand new console the same week. Teachers called my parents about his fights, his skipped classes, his attitude, and my father would just laugh, slap him on the back, and call him a wild spirit. When I brought home awards or little certificates, they ended up on the fridge for a week before disappearing. But Eldon's every messy triumph, every soccer goal, every half-baked YouTube video was treated like a coronation. I remember the barbecues, most vividly. Summer heat, the smell of charcoal, neighbors joking as Eldon strutted with a soccer ball tucked under his arm. "There goes the golden boy," they'd shout. My parents would beam, as if they'd birthed royalty. I used to laugh it off. I told myself it was harmless teasing, that it didn't mean anything. But I remember the sting, too, the way no one ever gave me a nickname, the way my sketches stayed hidden in my room while Eldon's face was paraded for everyone to see. My refuge was my bedroom. My walls weren't just painted, they were alive. Pages of sketches taped in clusters, little collages of faces and dreams, a world I created because the one outside never seemed to notice me. That room was the only place where I wasn't invisible. It was mine, and in it I was enough. Looking back now, I should have noticed the warning signs. Thanksgiving at our house had always been loud. Uncles shouting over the football game on TV. Aunts fussing in the kitchen. Cousins chasing each other until something broke. But that year it felt different. It felt staged. I sat at the far end of the table, wedged between a chipped cabinet and the radiator that hissed like it wanted to expose the tension in the room. The turkey hadn't even been carved when my mom stood up, lifted her glass of sparkling cider, and announced with a beaming grin, "Everyone, I have the most exciting news. Eldon's going to be famous online." The chatter froze mid-sentence. I turned toward my younger brother, who leaned back in his chair like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. He adjusted the baseball cap he always wore backward, smirk spreading across his face as though the room had been built just to spotlight him. My Uncle Harold clapped first, booming laughter echoing through the dining room. "That's my boy, a real modern star." My mom's voice dripped with pride as she clapped along. "He's got thousands of followers already, and people are donating money just to watch him play games. Isn't that incredible? The table erupted in cheers. Eldon pushed his plate forward, elbows on the table like he owned it, and began detailing how much he'd made in donations the week before. Yeah, one guy sent me $200 just because. I shouted his name out. Easy money. They roared with laughter. My aunts shook their heads in mock disbelief. My cousins stared at him with wide eyes, as if Eldon had single-handedly invented the internet. I felt my chest tighten. I'd been holding on to my own news all week, my acceptance letter to a scholarship program at the University of Illinois. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with donations or Livestream fans, but it was something I'd earned after years of staying up late drawing, perfecting my portfolio, pouring myself into something real. So I cleared my throat, heart hammering in my ears, and said softly, "Actually, I got some news too. I was offered a scholarship for—" But before I could even finish, my dad cut me off, his fork clattering against the plate. His tone was sharp, dismissive. "Sarah, don't make this about you. Tonight is Eldon's night." The words stung worse than the radiator, heat burning the back of my legs. A ripple of laughter moved down the table, people chuckling awkwardly, not at me, but around me, like I was the butt of a joke too unimportant to name. I looked at my mom, silently begging for her to say something, but she just squeezed Eldon's shoulder and beamed. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning so hot I thought they might leave scars. I shoved mashed potatoes around my plate, pretending not to notice the smirks from across the table. And then, as if to twist the knife, Eldon leaned over, his breath sticky with gravy and cranberry sauce, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Your art's just a hobby, Sarah. Nobody cares." The words sliced clean through me. My fork trembled in my hand. I could feel my cousins watching, waiting for me to snap back, but I swallowed the lump in my throat and kept silent. That was always my role, the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who never caused a scene. But inside, something cracked. It was small, like the first fracture in glass before it shatters completely. I pushed back from the table, muttering something about needing water. The hallway felt colder, darker, the family's laughter echoing behind me like a chorus of betrayal. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked pale, hollow, a girl fading into the wallpaper. I thought I'd found the bottom of humiliation that night. I thought being silenced in front of my entire extended family was the cruelest my mom could ever be. But I was wrong. Eldon's room no longer looked like the bedroom we grew up in. It was unrecognizable, glowing like some kind of shrine. Neon strips bled red and blue across the walls. Cameras perched like watchful eyes, wires snaking everywhere. The hum of equipment never stopped. It felt like the house itself had been rewired to serve him. He wasn't just my brother anymore. He was a brand. The boxes started arriving daily. Expensive microphones, chairs worth more than my entire wardrobe. Ring lights that blinded me if I passed by at the wrong angle. My parents carried them in with a kind of reverence, like they were handling relics. Sometimes my mom would snap at me if I so much as reached for one of the packages. "Don't touch that, Sarah. It's not for you." It wasn't just the stuff, it was how they treated him. They stocked the fridge with energy drinks by the case, filled the pantry with snacks labeled with his name, as though the rest of us were trespassing. When they left the house, they locked the upstairs doors, including my old room, his studio now. I wasn't allowed up there unless he called for me, which he never did. I became a shadow drifting around my own house, tiptoeing in the basement, hearing my parents' laughter rise from upstairs, as if I was listening from outside. Sometimes I'd stand at the foot of the staircase, looking up at the glow slipping out from under the door, wondering how much more they were willing to give him, how much more of me they were willing to erase. One night, I came up quietly to grab a blanket from the laundry. The house was dim except for the light of the kitchen, where my parents sat at the table, their voices low. My mom's tone was firm, almost giddy. "Eldon is our future. He's going to make it. People adore him." And then my dad's chuckle, Deep and certain, Sarah. She'll manage. She always does. Something inside me went still, then cold. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were rewriting the story of who mattered in this family, and I wasn't even a footnote. I gripped the banister, nails biting into the wood, my heart pounding with the weight of their words. That was the night I realized I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased. And the worst part, they weren't done yet. For weeks, I'd been dragging myself through the motions. Work, school, home, repeat. Most days, my art felt like a secret I was trying to smuggle past my own family. Scraps of paper tucked between textbooks, sketches hidden in my backpack. It wasn't until that Thursday afternoon, sitting in the cold, chalk-dusted studio at Monroe College, that I felt something shift. Dr. Keene, the kind of professor who looked like he'd been carved from the wood of old libraries, wire glasses, perpetually ink-stained fingers, hovered behind me as I finished a charcoal sketch. I'd drawn a crumbling church I'd seen downtown, light filtering through shattered stained glass. When I finally looked up, he was just staring. Not the polite kind of stare professors give when they're obligated to encourage you, but something deeper, sharper. This, he said finally, tapping the edge of the page with the back of his knuckle, isn't student work. This is professional. The words hit me like oxygen after drowning. My throat tightened. He leaned in, voice low, as if he were confiding a secret. You keep pushing like this, Sarah, and I could see you in Chicago this summer. There's an internship I know about, a gallery on Michigan Avenue. Chicago. The word pulsed in my ears like a lifeline. I nodded, afraid if I spoke I'd ruin the fragile moment, but inside I felt something ignite hope. Real hope. That night, I headed straight from class to the diner where I worked part-time. Grease clung to my hair, my apron smelled like burnt coffee. But for once, none of it weighed me down. My co-worker Callum caught me humming while I wiped down the counters. Callum was the kind of boy people overlooked. Messy blonde curls, always smelling faintly of turpentine from his side job painting houses. But he had a way of listening that made silence feel safe. "You're in a good mood," he said, grinning as he stacked menus. I hesitated, then told him. About Dr. Keene. About Chicago. About how, for a moment, someone saw me as more than just Eldon's forgotten sister. His smile softened and he shook his head. "Sarah, you deserve this. You deserve better than all of that." He didn't say your family, but I heard it anyway. The diner was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint scrape of a spoon in someone's pie dish. For once, my chest felt light. Someone believed in me. Someone thought I was worth more than the moldy basement, more than being erased. When I walked home that night, the cold Bloomington air stung my cheeks, but I didn't care. I clutched the strap of my bag tighter, the scholarship letter folded deep inside, and for the first time in months, I let myself imagine a different life. A life where I wasn't invisible. But hope is cruel. It gives you just enough air before the ground gives way. Because when I pushed open the front door that night, the house was silent except for a low hum upstairs, the sound of Eldon's streaming equipment, alive even when he wasn't. I kicked off my shoes, padded toward the basement stairs, and that's when I heard them. My parents. Their voices floated down from the kitchen. I froze, clutching the railing, every nerve straining. My mom's voice first, sharp as ever. "We need to talk about her." A pause. My dad's sigh followed. "Sarah." "Yes." "She's drifting. I saw her sketches again. She's wasting time. Art. That's not a future. Not compared to Eldon." Asterisk. My father's reply was muffled, reluctant. "She's smart, though. She'll figure something out." But then my mom's tone shifted, colder, final. "No. She'll manage, but we can invest in her. Every dollar, every ounce of energy has to go to Eldon now. He's the one who's going to make this family something. She'll understand. She always does." The words hit harder than any slap could have. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, my legs trembling. My entire body screamed to run upstairs, to confront them, to demand why I was always the afterthought, the sacrifice, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I stood there, silent, the hum of Eldon's studio pulsing above me like a reminder of everything I wasn't allowed to be. My chest ached, my vision blurred, and for the first time, I realized something terrifying. They weren't just dismissing me. They were planning my erasure. And I couldn't stop shaking because I knew. That night was only the beginning of what I was about to lose. It was past midnight when I trudged up the driveway, the cold biting through my jacket. My shift at the diner had run late, and my legs ached from hours on my feet. The house loomed in the dark, every upstairs window blazing with light, even though Eldon's stream had ended hours earlier. The glow felt unnatural, like the house itself was alive with someone else's future. That's when I saw it. Aunt Delora's car parked crookedly at the curb. The sight of it made my stomach twist. Delora never came by this late. She wasn't the type to visit. She was the type to meddle, to whisper poison and act like it was medicine. I still remembered how, when I was 12, she told me in a syrupy voice that girls like you should focus on being helpful, not important. I crept onto the porch, fingers stiff with cold as I reached for my keys. Then I froze. Voices floated through the kitchen window, sharp and unmistakable. Delora's low and oily. You're wasting time keeping her here. Kick her out. Why give space to dead weight? The words sliced through me like a blade. I pressed my back against the siding, my breath hitching in the dark. My mother's voice followed, calm but firm, the way she spoke when she'd already made up her mind. Soon. Eldon needs more room, and she'll survive. She always does. My knees weakened. The key slipped in my shaking hand, clattering to the wooden boards of the porch. For a moment, I thought they'd heard me. But the voices inside continued, muffled laughter rising like smoke. I crouched, fumbling to pick up the key, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold it. My mind spun. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They weren't just cutting corners around me. They were planning to erase me entirely, to strip away what little I had left. My bedroom was already gone. My dignity, piece by piece, had been fed to Eldon's glowing shrine upstairs. And now, my place in the house was next. The scholarship, the internship, the hope Callum's words had sparked. It all shattered in that instant, crumbling into dust I couldn't catch. Because what was the point of dreaming about Chicago when I couldn't even keep a roof over my head? I finally forced the key into the lock, the sound too loud, too final. Inside, I didn't dare look toward the kitchen. I slipped past the shadows, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, and fled down to the basement. My safe space wasn't safe anymore. The walls pressed in closer, the ceiling seemed lower, and the moldy smell I'd gotten used to now suffocated me. I curled up on my narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled to my chin, and the tears came hard and fast. My chest heaved, my eyes burned, and all I could hear was Delora's voice. Dead weight, dead weight, dead weight. I cried until my throat ached raw, until my pillow was damp and cold beneath me. My body shook with sobs I couldn't control, every breath breaking in two. But somewhere in the hollow hours of the night, as the house above me fell silent, something began to shift. My tears slowed. My fists clenched tighter around the blanket. The grief didn't fade, it hardened. The humiliation, the betrayal, the loneliness, they twisted together into something sharper. By morning, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, and my anger was louder than my tears. It happened faster than I ever imagined. One moment, I was sitting on the edge of my narrow basement bed, sketchbook balanced on my knees, and the next my mother was at the door, her voice sharp, final. Pack your things, Sarah. Tonight. No explanations. No arguments. Just black garbage bags shoved into my hands, as if my entire life could be bundled up and tossed aside like trash. Eldon leaned against the doorframe, neon light from his studio, painting his smug face in electric blue. He chuckled as I struggled to fit years of books, drawings, and clothes into flimsy bags. "Don't forget your crayons," he sneered. "Maybe you can sell sketches on a sidewalk." His laughter followed me with every zipper, every crumpled page, every tear I refused to let him see. My father drove me in silence. The highway stretched dark and endless between Bloomington and Cincinnati, only the rhythm of the tires filling the void. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't apologize. He didn't say anything. His jaw was tight, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel, as if speaking to me might somehow betray the choice he'd already made. We pulled up to Aunt Delora's sagging house past midnight. The porch light flickered weakly, casting shadows over piles of newspapers and rusted lawn chairs. She opened the door in her robe, her smile sharp, triumphant, like this was what she'd wanted all along. "Room's in the back," she said, waving dismissively. "Don't touch my things." My dad carried one bag inside, set it by the door, then turned back without meeting my eyes. The engine roared to life a moment later, and just like that he was gone. The room smelled of dust and mothballs, wallpaper peeling in long strips, stacks of junk crowding the corners. I sat on the bare mattress, my bags at my feet, surrounded by someone else's clutter, someone else's life. My chest ached with a hollow kind of grief, but beneath it burned something sharper. I whispered into the dark, the words trembling but steady. "Enough. I won't let them break me." And in that silence, something dangerous sparked inside me. That was the night the plan started forming. I kept my head down at Aunt Delora's, moving through her house like a shadow. She hardly noticed me anyway, not unless I forgot to wash a dish or left my shoes by the door. That suited me fine. The less she saw me, the more space I had to build my secret life, brick by fragile brick. Every morning, I dragged myself through her cluttered kitchen, inhaling the sour smell of old coffee and mildew. I went to the diner, tied on my apron, and smiled until my cheeks hurt. Customers never saw the storm inside me. They only saw the girl who refilled their cups and remembered their orders. But I saw them differently. I carried my sketchbook in my apron pocket, and during quiet moments, I'd pull it out, catching their expressions in quick strokes. The way a man hunched protectively over his newspaper, the way a woman's eyes softened when she talked about her child, the quiet dignity in the lines of an old couple's hands. One sketch became 10, 10 became 50. I began scanning them at the library, building a secret portfolio online, anonymous, hidden from my family. My little rebellion lived in charcoal and ink, far away from Eldon's neon lights and flashy streams. But Eldon, I couldn't stop watching him. Late at night, in the suffocating heat of Aunt Delora's back room, I'd sit with my phone glowing against my knees. His streams filled the screen, bright lights, loud music, his voice dripping with smug confidence. I watched the donations roll in, the sponsors piling onto his name, his followers multiplying by the thousands. I studied his patterns like a predator studying prey. When he smiled too wide, I knew he was lying. When he bragged about his deals, I paused, rewound, and wrote it all down. Every transaction, every promise, every arrogant slip. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It was documentation, evidence, proof. He thought the world adored him, but behind the curtain, I could see the cracks forming. Sponsors he overpromised, fans he ignored, arrogance that blinded him. And I was there, invisible, catching it all. At the diner, my pockets grew heavier with coins and crumpled bills. Every tip I made went into a jar beneath my mattress, hidden beneath stacks of old magazines no one would touch. Quarters and dollars became tens. Tens became 20s. I counted them over and over until I could almost taste freedom. Each dollar wasn't just money. It was a vote for my survival, a step out of the basement shadows my family had shoved me into. But it wasn't enough to save. I had to move like him, loudly, strategically, with purpose. So I created a second account, anonymous again, a mask for my mask. And there, I began posting my sketches, my words, my truths, always angled just enough to avoid their notice. Quiet whispers into the vast, endless dark of the internet. Some posts vanished. Others stuck. A handful of people noticed. They asked for more. They shared my work. The seed was growing. But with every risk came fear. What if Eldon found my accounts? What if Aunt Delora saw the money jar? What if my mother somehow learned I was planning a life outside the cage they'd built for me? Every night before bed, I pressed my hand over the jar beneath the mattress, feeling the edges of the bills through the thin fabric, whispering to myself, "Don't get caught." Not yet. And still, the fire inside me grew louder, stronger, demanding more. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. I wasn't ready to strike, not yet. But I was watching, waiting, and building my weapons in silence. It was risky, and if I failed, I'd lose everything. At first, I thought Callum was just busy. Everyone at the diner had lives beyond the greasy counters and endless coffee refills, and Callum, he was kind enough to deserve one. But then his laughter faded. His smiles became tighter, shorter, the kind that died before they ever reached his eyes. I'd catch him looking at me sometimes, not with warmth, but with hesitation, like I'd suddenly become a stranger standing in his shoes. And the worst part, he didn't even try to explain. He just disappeared into silence, little by little, until I felt like I was the only one still pretending we were friends. Nights in Aunt Delora's suffocating back room grew heavier. I'd lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying every moment we'd shared. The way he'd told me I deserved better than my family, the way he'd looked at my sketches like they were treasures instead of scraps. My chest ached with the memory, but no matter how many times I turned it over, I couldn't find the mistake I'd made. What had I done to drive him away? Weeks dragged by, and the answer finally came like a knife in the dark. A girl from the diner, one who thrived on gossip and secrets, leaned over the counter during a dead shift and whispered the truth. "Your brother reached out to Callum," she said, her voice thick with pity, like she was delivering a death sentence. "Told him you're unstable. A leech. Said you'd drag him down if he wasn't careful." Her words clanged in my head like church bells, sharp and merciless. Eldon. Of course it was Eldon. I felt my hands tremble as I gripped the edge of the counter. My nails dug into the laminate, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. All at once, every cold look from Callum, every careful step backward, made sense. It wasn't me. It had never been me. It was him. Eldon, with his perfect lighting and poisonous charm. Eldon, who knew exactly where to cut to make me bleed the deepest. He hadn't just stolen my family, my home, my place in the world. He'd stolen the one person who saw me, who made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I wanted to scream, to tell Callum the truth, to show him the bruises Eldon had left on my life, the scars my parents had ignored. But instead I swallowed it down, because even if I confronted him, would it matter? Eldon had already poisoned the well, and Callum had drunk every drop. I replayed the moment I found out over and over like a twisted film reel in my mind. The betrayal didn't come with fire. It came with cold, suffocating silence. The silence of a door closed without explanation. The silence of trust dissolving into air. That night, I went home and sat on the edge of my bed, the jar of crumpled bills heavy beneath my mattress. For a long time, I just stared at the floor, my reflection warped in the dusty mirror across the room. My chest felt hollow, scraped out, as if someone had reached inside and stolen the last fragile piece of hope I was clinging to. And then the rage came. Not a spark, but a flood. Hot, unrelenting, unstoppable. I pressed my hands against my face and whispered into the dark. "Why do you keep doing this to me, Eldon?" But there was no answer, of course. Just the sound of Aunt Delora's snores through the thin wall, the distant rumble of traffic outside, and the echo of my own voice breaking against the emptiness. The truth was clear now. I couldn't rely on anyone, not my family, not Callum, not even the kindness of strangers. Every time I reached out, the world found a new way to slap my hand back. The one person I thought I could trust stabbed me in the back. I used to think anger was dangerous, something that burned out of control and left you weaker than before. But this time it felt different. My anger didn't destroy me, it sharpened me. It was as if every betrayal, every slammed door, every smirk from Eldon had carved me into something harder, something unbreakable. The plan I'd whispered to myself in the dark, the one that started as survival, as escape, shifted into something bolder. No, escape wasn't enough anymore. I didn't just want to leave them behind. I wanted to expose them, to strip away the perfect little mask Eldon had built and show the world what I'd always seen underneath, the rot. It began small, like planting seeds. I created a folder on my old laptop, hidden deep inside layers of decoy files. Schoolwork, math notes, random. In there, I started building a case. Screenshots, recordings, receipts. Every scrap of evidence I could gather, I tucked away like stolen jewels. Most nights, I'd sit in the diner's back booth after closing, the air thick with grease and coffee grounds, my fingers tapping furiously on the keys. Customers had no idea what I was doing, scribbling in my sketchpad between orders. They thought I was just drawing faces, and in a way I was just not theirs. Through my phone, I became a shadow in Eldon's streams. I watched every broadcast, every sponsored shout-out, every fake laugh he forced for donations. I learned to look past the flashing neon lights, past the carefully staged background my parents had practically built for him. I saw the details, the energy drink brand that paid him under the table, the products he hyped without disclosure, the staged fan giveaways that never actually happened. One by one, I started capturing them. Recordings of him bragging when he thought the camera was off, screenshots of conversations where sponsors begged him to tone down his arrogance, only for him to mock them the moment the deal closed. Every file I saved felt like a weapon, polished and waiting. And the deeper I dug, the more I found. Eldon wasn't just a spoiled kid with a camera. He was dirty. Shady contracts, manipulated donations, bots faking his view counts. My parents had no idea. They were too busy buying him ring lights and showering him with applause. But I knew, and now I had proof. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lean back and stare at the screen, my heart pounding with the thrill of it. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. I wasn't invisible. I was dangerous. But it wasn't just about Eldon. It was about them too, my parents, who had chosen him over me again and again, who had pushed me into the basement, then out of the house, then out of their lives entirely. Every whisper I overheard, every time they dismissed me as if I didn't exist, became fuel. They thought they were untouchable because they had crowned their golden boy. But I was building the fire that would burn their kingdom down. I sketched between shifts, but my drawings changed. They weren't safe little portraits anymore. They were raw, jagged, filled with teeth and shadows. I drew Eldon with his mask cracked open, my parents with their smiles stretched too wide, their eyes hollow. Each line was a promise. I will not let you erase me. And yet, even as I built my arsenal, there were nights when the weight of it all pressed hard against my chest. What if I failed? What if all my files, all my evidence went nowhere? What if the world still chose to believe his polished lies over my ugly truth? That thought haunted me. Failure didn't just mean embarrassment, it meant the end. If I exposed myself too soon, Eldon would crush me and my parents would finish what they'd started. I'd be left with nothing but ashes. But the fear didn't stop me. If anything, it made me sharper. Every move I made was deliberate. Every file I saved, every screenshot I hid, was placed like a brick in the foundation of something bigger than myself. They thought they had silenced me, shoved me into corners and shadows until I disappeared. But the shadows became my cover, and in the shadows I was growing stronger. One night, as I sat alone with my laptop glowing against the darkness, I whispered the words out loud, just to hear them. They thought they were untouchable. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling not with fear this time, but with certainty. They were wrong. The wedding was supposed to be about love, about family, about new beginnings. But for me, walking into that hotel ballroom in Louisville felt like stepping straight into a spotlight I never asked for. The chandeliers glittered above polished marble floors. Laughter echoed against the walls, and everywhere I turned, faces I hadn't seen in years flickered with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I hadn't been invited. Not really. My cousin, sweet Margaret, had slipped me the details weeks earlier with a quiet hug and a whispered, "Please come. You're still family to me." And so I came, alone, wearing the one dress I could afford, stitched and mended at the seams. The moment I stepped inside, the whispers started. "That's her. The daughter they kicked out. I heard she's living with Delora now. Poor thing." They didn't bother lowering their voices much. To them, I wasn't a guest. I was gossip walking and breathing in their midst. At the center of it all, my parents stood tall, radiant, like royalty among peasants. My mother's dress shimmered under the lights, her laugh loud and rehearsed. My father kept one hand tucked proudly into his suit pocket, the other clutching a glass of champagne as though he owned the night. And Eldon, of course Eldon, wore a custom-tailored suit and that practiced smirk, already drawing a small crowd of relatives eager to talk about his streaming career. I kept my distance, but their words still carried across the room. "Eldon's going to be famous online. You wouldn't believe the sponsors knocking on his door. He's practically supporting himself already. Such talent, such charisma." The compliments stacked higher and higher, each one a dagger twisting in my chest. When I finally crossed the room to greet a pair of relatives, their eyes darted over me nervously, as if my presence was contagious. They muttered pleasantries, then quickly excused themselves. And that's when I heard it. My mother's voice, sharp, deliberate, slicing through the crowd until it reached me. "Don't ruin this for us." She was right beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her smile painted perfect for the room, but her eyes dripping venom. Her nails dug just enough into my skin to warn me, to remind me that I was an intruder in their storybook life. I forced a smile, though my cheeks burned. I wouldn't dream of it, but inside my blood roared. The toasts began soon after. The bride and groom stood together, radiant and trembling with happiness. Family and friends lifted glasses, voices warm with love, laughter weaving through every word. For a moment, I almost let myself get lost in it, almost forgot the weight pressing on my chest, until my mother stood. She clinked her glass, delicately drawing all eyes. And then she began. "I just want to say how proud we are tonight, not only of Margaret and her wonderful husband, but of our son, Eldon." She beamed, gesturing toward him as though he were a prince at a coronation. "He's building something incredible. He's going to be a star. We're just so blessed to see him shining, bringing pride to our family name." The crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. Eldon smirked wider, basking in the glow. And me? I sat frozen, my hands trembling against the stem of my glass. I had expected their arrogance, their vanity, but to hijack someone else's wedding to make it about him? It was like watching them peel away the last scraps of my dignity in front of everyone I'd ever known. I felt the stares again, some sympathetic, some mocking, most indifferent. The whispers pressed in. That's the one they left behind, the one who didn't matter. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. As my mother raised her glass higher, her voice dripping with triumph, I pushed my chair back. The scrape against the marble floor echoed louder than it should have, slicing through the chatter. Heads turned. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, but my legs moved anyway, carrying me to my feet. Every eye in the ballroom was on me. My mother's smile faltered, her glass still lifted mid-toast. My father stiffened beside her. Eldon's smirk twisted, already preparing for whatever cruel quip he could weaponize against me. But I didn't look at them. I looked at the bride, sweet Margaret, who had invited me here with love, who deserved a night that was hers alone. My hand shook around my glass, but my voice, when it came, was steady. Inside, a storm was brewing. Years of betrayal, years of being erased. I wasn't just standing to speak. I was standing because this moment, this humiliation, wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of mine. And as I drew in a breath, ready to speak, I felt the room tighten, the silence stretch. Because they had no idea what was coming next. As she raised her glass to toast, I stood up. My glass hovered in my hand, catching the light of the chandeliers. My mother's smile froze in place, but her eyes drilled into me with warning. My father's lips pressed into a hard line. Eldon shifted, already smirking, ready to mock whatever words I might spill. But instead of raising my glass to toast, I set it down gently on the table. My chair scraped once more against the marble floor, and without a word I turned and walked out. Gasps fluttered through the room. Whispers swelled like a wave crashing behind me. To them, it must have looked like I was humiliated, retreating, proving once again that I wasn't strong enough to stand in their spotlight. Let them think that. For now, I slipped into the quiet of the hotel lobby, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might bruise my ribs. My hands shook as I pulled my phone from my purse, fingers clumsy with adrenaline. For weeks, I had been building a folder, screenshots of fake sponsorships, forged contracts, the under-the-table deals Eldon had made with sketchy energy drink companies, even the way he had manipulated viewers into donating thousands while laughing about them behind closed doors. Every file, every receipt, every clipped audio recording had been carefully labeled, time-stamped, undeniable. And now it was ready. I opened my messages and attached the entire folder to an email addressed to one person, Crosby Hale. Crosby wasn't just some random YouTuber. He was the YouTuber, the one known for tearing down frauds with receipts so airtight they could sink ships. His exposés went viral within hours, wrecking reputations overnight. Eldon worshipped him once, even quoted his videos, never realizing that one day he'd be the subject of that scalpel-sharp attention. My thumb hovered for a moment over the send button. My breath caught, because this wasn't just revenge. This was war. I pressed send. The email whooshed away, and with it, weeks of fear, anger, and silence. My legs trembled as I walked back into the ballroom. But inside me, something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't powerless. The wedding carried on, laughter and music swirling as if nothing had happened. I slipped back into the corner, unnoticed, a ghost among sequins and tuxedos. Eldon was holding court again, gesturing with exaggerated flair as he told some story that made his audience laugh too loud. My mother clapped her hands like she was applauding a performance, pride radiating off her in waves. But then an hour later, phones began to buzz. 1, then 2, then a dozen. The sound was subtle at first, a ripple across the crowd, until it became a steady hum of vibration and murmurs. Guests pulled their devices from purses and pockets, eyes squinting at screens, brows furrowed, hands flew to mouths. A silence heavier than any music fell over the room. And then someone gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. Across the ballroom, I saw my cousin lean over to her husband, her phone clutched in her hand. The screen was angled just enough for me to read the headlines splashed in bold across YouTube. The dark side of Eldon Winslow. Crosby Hale had wasted no time. The video thumbnail showed Eldon's face mid-smirk, framed by neon lights, with the words scammer, fraud, manipulator stamped across it in red. The murmurs swelled into chaos. Is this real? Oh my God. I knew something was off. Fingers pointed, heads turned. The crowd that had been Eldon's eager audience seconds before now devoured the video in real time, eyes wide with shock and disgust. Eldon's smile faltered. His hand twitched at his pocket, pulling out his own phone. My mother leaned in, whispering urgently, her perfect posture beginning to crack. My father's jaw tightened, his champagne glass lowering slowly as the whispers grew sharper, crueler. I stood at the back of the room, silent, watching. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I didn't move. I didn't need to. One by one, gasps filled the air as Crosby's voice echoed from tiny speakers, detailing fake giveaways, mocking donations, falsified contracts. Receipts filled the screen. Audio clips of Eldon laughing at his stupid fans played like a damning soundtrack. Crosby didn't just cut Eldon down, he dismantled him, piece by piece in front of millions. And in that ballroom, in front of the entire family that had erased me, the unraveling had begun. Eldon's face drained of color. His hands shook as he scrolled, tapping frantically, muttering curses under his breath. My mother hissed at him, her smile frozen, but her eyes frantic, darting to see who was watching. My father looked like a man whose investment had just gone bankrupt. I sipped from a glass of water, calm, almost serene, as the empire they had built on lies started to crumble. But deep down I knew something. This humiliation, this unraveling, wasn't the end. This was only the first crack in their facade. Because the truth about Eldon was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than anyone in that ballroom could imagine. And as the buzz of scandal spread like wildfire through the wedding after-party, one thought pulsed in my mind, steady, certain. But that was just the beginning. The ballroom had cracked like a shell, but I knew the yolk hadn't spilled yet. Eldon was never one to accept defeat, not even when the proof was irrefutable, not even when the whole room whispered his downfall. He thrived on performance, and a cornered performer is the most dangerous of all. Later that night, when the music had dwindled and the champagne glasses sat half-empty on white linen tables, I saw it, the blue glow of his phone casting sharp shadows across his face. He was going live. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the camera, his jaw set, his eyes already shining with manufactured pain. I didn't need to be close to hear it. The room had gone quiet as guests huddled in corners, watching his live stream play out in real time. "Guys," he began, voice cracking, the picture of a broken young man under siege. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I've been lied to, manipulated. I'm the victim here." And then came the tears. He dragged his hands across his face, smeared his eyeliner, made sure every tear was caught in frame. His voice shook, words tumbling out between gasps as if the weight of the world had crushed him. He spun a story where shady managers had forged documents, where jealous competitors had faked receipts, where anonymous haters had stitched together audio clips to destroy his career. I watched the comments fly across the screen, a tornado of rage, betrayal, confusion. "Liar. How could you scam us? Stay strong, Eldon. We believe you. I donated my rent money to you. Was that a joke, too?" It was chaos, raw and unfiltered. His fans split in two, the loyalists screaming to defend him, the betrayed demanding answers, their anger sharp enough to cut through glass. But then the sponsors began to pull out. One by one, contracts froze, brand names scrubbed their logos from his channel banner, and glossy endorsements vanished overnight. His empire was bleeding out in real time, and everyone could see it. I should have felt satisfied. I should have smiled, maybe even laughed. But watching him beg, watching him claw at the scraps of sympathy from strangers, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a warning. Because Eldon wasn't crying for forgiveness. He was plotting his next move, even through those crocodile tears. And I wasn't the only one who knew it. My phone buzzed violently on the table. I saw my mother's name flash across the screen. Against every instinct, I picked it up. Her voice tore through the speaker before I could say a word. "You traitor!" The venom in her tone nearly knocked the breath out of me. I held the phone away from my ear, but her shrieks bled through anyway. "Do you know what you've done? You've humiliated us in front of everyone. Your cousin's wedding is ruined. Your brother's career is hanging by a thread. And you are the one holding the knife." She spat the word traitor again, like it was her favorite curse. My father's voice thundered faintly in the background, asking who she was yelling at. She didn't answer him. She just kept lashing, her fury bubbling hotter with every syllable. You think anyone will forgive you? You think anyone will look at you and not see the pathetic little girl who tried to destroy her own blood? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The rage pouring through the line was relentless, unbroken, almost inhuman. I realized then that she wasn't just angry at me, she was terrified, because everything they had spent years building was starting to collapse, and in her mind I was the detonator. Finally, she paused, her breathing sharp and uneven. I thought the call was ending. I thought maybe she'd run out of words to hurl at me. But then I heard it, the sound of the phone shifting hands. My father's voice came next, low, controlled, more dangerous than her screaming could ever be. Listen carefully, he said. Each word was precise, heavy, deliberate. You've started something you don't understand. You think this is justice? It's not. This is war. And wars have casualties. His silence afterward was louder than thunder. My hand went clammy around the phone, my breath shallow. Dad, I whispered, but he cut me off. You've made yourself one of them. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the screen glowing dark in my hand, my reflection faint against the glass. The words replayed in my mind, over and over, wrapping themselves around my throat like a rope. Casualties. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cursed. He hadn't even raised his voice. But his tone, flat, unyielding, certain, was worse than any threat I had ever heard. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. I stared out across the after-party, where the remnants of celebration had curdled into gossip and fear, where Eldon's Livestream still blared from half the phones in the room, and I knew my family wasn't going to let me walk away from this. Their empire was collapsing, and when empires fall, they don't go down quietly. They drag everyone into the rubble with them, and I had just heard the first crack of stone. Then my father picked up the phone, and what he said chilled me. The words echoed in my skull long after the call ended. We'll say you forged it. No one will believe you. My father's voice wasn't a threat. It was a verdict, a ruling already signed, sealed, and executed in the court of his mind. He knew the weight of his name. He knew the power of appearances. And he knew how quickly truth can be twisted when the right mouths repeat the right lies. By morning, the smear campaign had already begun. Posts sprouted online like weeds after rain. Threads on fan forums, tweets dripping with rehearsed outrage, Facebook rants so carefully constructed they might as well have been drafted in a boardroom. Each one sang the same refrain. Eldon was innocent. I was jealous. I was bitter. I was nothing more than the envious sister trying to drag down her brother's success. But what broke me wasn't the strangers. It wasn't the fans who didn't know me, the ones who spat venom behind cartoon avatars. No, it was family. I scrolled, numb, staring at Aunt Delora's Facebook post. The same aunt who once rolled her eyes every time Eldon's name was mentioned, who used to laugh and say, "He's just a boy with a webcam. Don't act like it's Hollywood." That same woman had written a post dripping with sanctimony, defending him to the bone. "My nephew Eldon is a good man," she wrote. "A generous soul who's been manipulated and slandered by someone who should have loved him most. My heart breaks that jealousy can drive family to such ugliness. Please don't believe the lies." She had never even called me by name, just someone who should have loved him most. The comments beneath it were a chorus of validation. "Preach, Auntie. So true. Family can be toxic. Protect Eldon at all costs." I felt my chest tighten, breath hitching as though invisible hands were pressing me down into the mattress. I had expected the fans to fight back. I had even expected my parents to scream. But Delora? She had been my one soft edge in that family, the only adult who sometimes dared to say out loud what I had always whispered in my own head. And now, Even she had folded into their machinery, reciting their lines, building their walls. It wasn't just betrayal, it was suffocation. Because if even Delora could be turned into their mouthpiece, what chance did I have when they all decided to circle the wagons? My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't family, it was the investigator Crosby Hale had brought in to authenticate the files before posting. The voice on the other end was clipped, careful, almost bureaucratic. "There's been a complication," he said. "The Winslows are claiming the screenshots were doctored. The sponsorship invoices fabricated. Their lawyers are already preparing statements." I froze. I wanted to shout that I had the originals, that I hadn't touched a pixel, that every screenshot had been taken straight from Eldon's public streams and private chats. But the investigator wasn't asking me for explanations. He was warning me. Everything's about to come down to credibility, yours versus theirs. And they've already started pushing narratives that you faked all of it. My heart thundered in my chest. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. Credibility. That single word was a noose tightening around me. Because in every room, in every family dinner, in every whispered story, I had always been the unreliable one, the dramatic one, the sensitive one, the girl with too many drawings and not enough sense. And now, when it mattered most, I realized the truth. They weren't just dismantling my evidence. They were dismantling me. I lay back against the wall of my aunt's cluttered guest room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling as the weight of it sank in. If the world believed them, if the world decided I was jealous, bitter, unstable, then everything I had gathered would be dust. My brother would walk away clean, my parents would beam with pride, and I would be nothing more than the cautionary tale they had always painted me as. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath, but even in the silence, the voices followed me. My father's decree, no one will believe you. My mother's shriek, traitor. Aunt Delora's post, jealous and bitter. Each one layering over the other until it felt like my very name was being erased. The walls of the house pressed in, heavy with the smell of old mothballs and forgotten knickknacks, suffocating me in their clutter. I thought of every file I'd saved, every night I'd spent hunched over my phone, fingers trembling as I documented Eldon's arrogance. And now, all of it dangled on the edge of a blade, ready to be severed with a single declaration. Forgery. I pressed the phone tighter to my chest, as if clutching it could keep the truth safe inside. But deep down, a colder realization crawled up my spine. The Winslows weren't just fighting back. They were rewriting the script. They were turning me into the villain of my own story. And as the investigator's voice trailed off, telling me that an authority figure would soon have to make a call on which side to believe, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. This wasn't just about exposure anymore. This was about survival. Because if they won this round, I wasn't just losing the fight. I was losing myself. The air grew heavy, my lungs tight, my heart hammering against bone as if it wanted out. I could almost hear the gavel already, the decision forming somewhere beyond my reach, in the hands of people who had never once looked me in the eye. And as the clock ticked toward judgment, one thought swallowed all the rest. The authority figure was about to decide. The waiting was worse than the betrayal. Every hour felt like a verdict hanging over my head, tightening its grip on my throat. The investigators stalled, their voices suddenly cautious, their questions colder, sharper. They were hesitating because Eldon had gone live again, spinning his story with trembling lips and practiced tears. My parents sat behind him like bodyguards, nodding at every word, selling the picture of a daughter unhinged, a girl desperate for attention, a sibling willing to burn down her family just to be seen. The headlines mirrored their performance, like a sick echo chamber. Rising star, or slandered son? Is this just sibling drama? Jealousy in the family tree. Each one landed in my chest like a stone. Each one chipped away at the mountain of evidence I had built. It didn't matter what files I had, what screenshots I clung to. If the world believed the story they told, then I was the fraud. I was the liar. I begged them, my voice cracking, my hands trembling around the phone, as I pleaded with investigators to look deeper, to trace the sponsorship money, to check the metadata in the files, to just for once believe me. My words spilled out like blood from an open wound. I could hear my desperation in every syllable, and I hated it, hated how weak I sounded, hated that I was giving them exactly what my parents wanted, the picture of a girl unraveling. And for a terrifying moment, I saw it in their silence. The decision tipping. The gavel is about to fall. Then a new witness stepped forward. The shift was seismic, like the ground itself had cracked open beneath Eldon's perfect facade. Out of nowhere, a former sponsor rep, someone I had never even met, leaked a string of emails. Real, undeniable, time-stamped proof. Not only did they confirm Eldon's shady deals, but they dragged my parents straight into the mess. Their signatures, their approval, their greed splattered across every line. In an instant, the narrative flipped. Headlines rewrote themselves, comment sections turned savage. Crosby uploaded part 2 of his expose, and the internet caught fire. Eldon's golden boy mask shattered. But Eldon wasn't finished yet. Eldon's face filled the live stream, red-eyed and shaking, his voice breaking between sobs. He slammed his fists into the desk, sent cameras crashing, shouted that he was broken because of me. His words cut like poison. Sarah bullied me my whole life. She wants me dead. Thousands watched in real time. Some believed him, flooding my messages with threats, spitting his lies back at me. But I didn't cry this time. I didn't crumble. I just sat there, watching his performance unravel, and felt the edges of a grim smile tug at my lips. The recording would end it all. I'd waited for this moment, not just weeks, not just months, but years. Every bruise of silence, every shrug of dismissal, every cruel smirk had built to this. And when I hit send, when that file slipped from my hard drive to Crosby's inbox, I swear I felt something inside me unclench. The clip wasn't just evidence. It was a confession wrapped in arrogance. Eldon had been drunk, sitting in a circle with his online friends on Discord, voice lazy with pride as he called his fans stupid donors with nothing better to spend their money on. He even laughed, called them walking wallets. My parents' voices bled into the background, my mother's high-pitched chuckle, my father's low grunt of agreement. My mom's words were sharp enough to cut glass. As long as the money keeps rolling in, let them be fools. And my dad, always the quieter one, chimed in, "This is just the start. Play them right, and we'll never have to worry again." The world had heard the sob story. They'd seen Eldon's trembling hands and staged breakdown. They'd swallowed my parents' pity act, even entertained the headlines that tried to frame me as some jealous sister lashing out. But now the mask tore clean off. The clip exploded across Twitter first. Retweets flew like wildfire. Hashtag surged. Hashtag Eldon exposed. Hashtag scam family. Hashtag walking wallets. Crosby uploaded it within the hour, his thumbnail screaming. Caught on tape. Eldon Winslow laughs at fans. This time, there was no hesitation. No pause. Sponsors who had frozen deals now cut them permanently. Contracts terminated mid-sentence. Donations dried up instantly, as if his well of easy money had been poisoned. Even his most loyal fans couldn't spin what they'd heard. It wasn't tears this time. It wasn't staged victimhood. It was raw greed, arrogance, and contempt. And then the silence began. The stream alert stopped. The donations vanished. The constant ding of incoming sponsorship emails went quiet. His neon studio, once pulsing with artificial life, became a sterile cave of dead LEDs. But the fallout didn't end online. That clip had weight. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. Sponsors had been deceived, products falsely endorsed, money pocketed under lies. Federal agents started sniffing around within days. What had begun as a family feud, messy and personal, was now a legal firestorm. I wasn't there when they came, but I can imagine it. My parents always kept the blinds half drawn, like they thought privacy was power. but neighbors talk, and one of them texted me that morning. Black SUVs outside, agents in jackets moving through the Winslow home. I pictured it, the front door swinging open, the family that had prided themselves on control, now cornered in their own living room. Eldon's face drained of the fake confidence he'd carried for years, my mother's shrill protests falling flat against badges and warrants, my father's stoic silence cracking into panic. I wasn't in that house anymore. I wasn't in the moldy basement or on the sidelines, clutching scraps of dignity. But in my mind, I stood there in the entryway where I had once begged to be seen, and I let myself savor it. For once, the silence in their house wasn't mine, it was theirs. But revenge doesn't wrap up in neat little bows. Justice doesn't glide in without leaving shadows. Because as I sat there, staring at my phone, watching the live updates roll across news tickers, a single thought chilled me to my bones. If they were willing to sacrifice me when everything was fine, what would they do now that everything was crumbling? And that's when I realized the story wasn't finished. Not yet. The city hums beneath me, a rhythm that doesn't drown me out but lifts me higher. Chicago feels like a second skin now. The buzz of traffic, the skyline lit in glass and steel, the way the lake seems endless from my loft window. I sit by the wide pane of glass, sketchbook balanced on my knees, pencil gliding as if it finally has permission to breathe. For the first time in years, I'm not hiding. I'm not sketching in the shadows of a basement, not huddled over scraps while someone else's neon lights filled the house upstairs. My walls are my own now, and are covered in art. Galleries have started calling. My professor's recommendation opened doors I never thought I'd touch. I am free. I am seen. My parents are still tangled in the wreckage they built. Fraud charges, federal investigations, interviews where they fumble for words they once used so easily against me. Eldon? He's nothing but a cautionary headline now. His channel collapsed overnight, his fan base scattered. His name spit out in anger rather than praise. And Aunt Elora, so smug in her cruelty, hides behind locked doors, pretending she never played a role. On paper, it looks perfect. I won. I reclaimed what they stole. I turned their silence into my voice. And yet, at night, when the city quiets, when the sketches dry and the pencil stills, a whisper crawls in. A question I can't quite silence. Did I go too far? I see Eldon's tear-streaked face, even if I know most of those tears were fake. I hear my mother scream when the agents entered. The sound of a woman realizing control had finally slipped from her fingers. I picture my father's silence, the same silence that once crushed me, now turned against him. And still I wonder, could I have walked away? Could I have chosen peace instead of fire? But then I remember the garbage bag shoved at me, my dad's car pulling away as if I were disposable. I remember my mother's smirk at that wedding, telling me not to ruin their night. I remember Eldon whispering, "Nobody cares." And I realize it wasn't just revenge. It was survival. Now I turn to you, because this story isn't just mine, it's a mirror. Would you have done the same? Or would you have stayed silent? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because revenge stories like this, they should always, always be told.